So hello, I'm Bob Summerwill. I describe myself there as a bridge builder. I've spent most of the past 2 or 3 years trying to stop people from killing each other on blockchain projects because there has been a lot of tribalism and animosity for no good reason. Oh my goodness. The other day, I saw a screen in downtown Vancouver outside Best Buy with a Windows firewall pop-up on it. It's one of the massive screens right in the middle of downtown, just like that. So who am I? I previously spent 18 years in the video games industry, a lot of that at EA Sports. That's why I'm in Vancouver. For anyone who doesn't know, one of the, I think the largest game studio in the world is actually here in Vancouver, what was previously called EA Canada. So I worked there for 11 years, and that's why I'm here. I came here to work on FIFA. So lots of different roles. But my highest one there was I was the software architect for all of EA Sports. So I spent 20 years working on all sorts of different platforms, general software engineer, generalist, architect, systems engineer. And I got interested in blockchain really in 2014. I met Vitalik Buterin here in Vancouver. For anyone who doesn't know, Vancouver is where the first Bitcoin ATM in the world was in October 2013. And Vitalik was here in 2014. I met him when Ethereum was starting. But I really just got going while I was in Toronto the following year in 2015. Because order of magnitude more stuff going on over there as a big financial center, though things are getting really going in Vancouver. The first thing I was actually doing was seeing if I could get Ethereum working on my smartwatch. So I was really into wearables at the time, mobile and wearables, and that turned into a role at the Ethereum Foundation. So I got hired by the Ethereum Foundation working on the C++ client there in 2016, and I was there at the time of the DAO fork, and then later went to join Consensus and was pretty foundational, setting up the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, which some of you may have heard of, and I do various things now. Anyway, winners and losers. There can be only one. Everyone's got to love Highlander, right? All too common a misperception is that things need to be a zero-sum game, that you have to have a loser to have a winner. And there are very, very few things which are really, truly zero-sum. An awful lot of the time, you're really a lot better to collaborate and grow the pie for everyone and create value. That's really how civilization and humanity works better, is by looking for our commonalities, which are always a lot greater than our differences. So Emin Gun Sira, who is at Cornell, did this tweet in April saying, "No single coin will moon by itself. Either the entire ensemble goes up together, or they all mop the floor, mired in regulations, scams, and lawsuits. It's essential for the communities to work together." And I mean, I think we see that even more now in a market slump. You know, it's like the morning after a party, right? You know, here's your hangover. And things which seemed to make an awful lot of sense last night, maybe not so much in the morning. Kent Barton wrote a great article here, again, around the same time, you know, "Divided We Fall, the Irrational Insanity of Crypto Tribalism." Calm academic discussion is all too often substituted with emotional personal attacks and overly simplified narratives. Consider how adherents from opposing groups tend to view these projects. that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme, Ethereum is a centralized scam, EOS is scammy vaporware, as is Cardano, and Bitcoin Cash is a malicious fork led by Satan himself. Yeah, it's true! To an outsider, it must seem ludicrous to watch countless smart minds working on blockchain technology, developers, entrepreneurs, and other enthusiasts gifted with an ability to think outside the box and see a vision, descend into this bickering. It's quite true. You look across the whole space, you've got incredibly intelligent, brainy people who are, in the main, motivated because they want to build a better world, with putting power back in the hands of individuals, and, we just behave like little kids. At EdCon this May, we had an Ethereum Classic talk at an Ethereum conference, and that was fantastic. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Korea, went to Seoul for the Ethereum Classic Summit. So we've actually got these bridges being built across the communities where things were, oh so bitter and bad a couple of years ago. And I really do see quite a sea change in 2018 over 2014 when I first really got started. And I think that's really indicative of the fact that we're not really needing to argue that, blockchain is a thing. That there might be some value here. I mean, I think we're kind of past that. I think it's, there might be something here. So with that being the case, we're really on this sort of path to boring. It's something I've said several times is if you can make blockchain as boring as databases, that's success. If you're saying to someone, well, what do you do? I work in blockchain. How very boring. That's success. Really, where a technology has just become, it's just become accepted. In the same way as the internet or the web or mobile devices. When the first iPhone came out, it didn't even have an app store. I guess you had BlackBerry a little bit earlier, but the idea that you'd conduct most of your business on your phone seemed crazy, but there you go. Time goes by, and that's, I guess, what a lot of us hope for blockchain, is it just fades into the background, and of course you have that. So yeah, since November I've been talking to an awful lot of different communities. Because yeah, there's an awful lot more commonality than there really is difference. And a key highlight of this year, Dogecoin. Who's at Dogecoin? Woo! Anyway, yeah. And the other thing to note is, did anyone see that Doge was actually the safe place to park your money recently? It was the only, if you'd have bought Doge, everything else down, Doge up. Anyway, I spoke at the Ethereum Community Conference in March of this year, and I was really talking there about a call to an end to tribalism and highlighting that even within the Ethereum community, you've got these different factions and stereotypes. And I think a lot of this is just, it's just human psychology. It's just very easy to demonize people, especially if you don't know them personally. If you haven't spent time with them personally, you've only seen them, interacted with them online. So, just saying here, so, the Ethereum Foundation, Vitalik is a dictator who single-handedly bailed out the DAO. Charles, working on Cardano, is Emmanuel Goldstein. The ultimate demon character. Joe Lubin at Consensus is an empire builder who only cares about money. that Gavin Wood is egotistical and non-collaborative, that Anthony Diorio is an opportunist who only cares about money, and then that myself and Joe Lubin and Amber Balday and others who have worked on these enterprise efforts, we're obviously complete sellouts who just want to, hijack everything for the status quo and sell us out to the bankers. Of course we do. But, they're just demonizations. They're not true. The fact is that different humans have different worldviews. There are very, very few universal values over time. So much of what we have is contextual and cultural. And often the people that are closest to us end up being the ones that you demonize the most. You got 99.9% in common, but there's that one little thing, and then you have a Catholic versus Protestant burn you at the stake thing. So why collaborate? So Bill Joy here from Sun Microsystems, as he says, no matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for someone else. And that's true even for the largest companies or countries in the world. If you work within silos, well, you've got less people, you've got less opinions, you've got less input. And I think this is really why open source has become so prevalent over the last few decades, is that for big problems, you need a lot of people, and you need a lot of brains. And it's an awful lot better to work on a common base together, and then to build your businesses on top of it, than it is to try and do a land grab and have some exclusive silo for yourself. I mean, that is especially true for blockchain, given that you're looking to build, a trust minimization common infrastructure. Having proprietary or closed technologies, makes as little sense as having, proprietary internet standards. And something to bear in mind on all of this, especially across the different kind of blockchain projects, is that, most of these things are just trade-offs. They're just engineering trade-offs. There's no right or wrong. There's no magic single silver bullet that's going to be the answer to everything. They're just tools. So, here is Zamfir's triangle, which is really talking about consensus protocols, and just sort of talking there about, sort of trade-offs that you have between the amount of decentralization and, how quickly you get to finality and so on. And many systems have these kind of trade-offs in various forms. So, I mean, the idea that you're going to get, the answer, if we just think harder, we're going to get to the winner, right? We'll get to the answer, the one chain to rule them all. And I mean, that makes as little sense as when relational databases were invented, just sort of saying, okay, so we're going to have the database now, right? Here's the world database. Would you like to add some rows to the world database? Let me do that for you. That's obviously never going to scale. If you have a single anything with a single set of trade-offs, it's never going to make anyone happy. It's the same problems that you have in politics. Can we come up with a single policy that's going to make 300 million people happy? Yeah, well, good luck with that. Anyway, some interesting work that's happening within the Ethereum and broader community. Just a few things to call out. So, I mean, you've got ongoing work on public Ethereum clients. So, I mean, Geth and Parity have been around the longest, but something very interesting that's happening now is that you have new Ethereum clients appearing. So, Trinity is a new Python client. Mantis is actually originally an Ethereum client, Ethereum Classic client, built by IOHK. But something very interesting that they announced there is that they're adding Ethereum mainnet support as well. So all of a sudden you've had, sort of 18 months worth of effort on building this new client in Scala, and so that's on top of the Java virtual machine, and then that's coming to the Ethereum mainnet as well. Another one coming up there is Pantheon, just in the enterprise Ethereum clients there. So when the enterprise Ethereum alliance started last February, I was a co-lead architect of that, and I gave the technical talk at that opening event. But my co-presenter there, a guy called Shahan, who works for Consensus. So while I've been going around the world hugging everyone for the last 18 months and trying to stop them fighting, he's actually the PhD who's gone back to the lab and has been building a new client. And what they have there is, Consensus are very well resourced. So they've got about 40 or 50 person team, of some of the best cryptographers, distributed systems people in the world, building a new client from scratch to spec, but also with the knowledge of enterprise needs, because they've been doing, big, large-scale enterprise engagements for the last several years at Consensus, including up to nation-state level. So Dubai, for example, have got this initiative ongoing at the moment where they're looking to get all government functions on blockchain by 2020. And Consensus has been heavily involved there. And then you've got those kind of real requirements feeding back into the code base. And I think we're going to see more and more of this. So, again, looking at these, enterprise Ethereum clients, so Strato from Block Apps, Quorum, that was actually built by JP Morgan, and then Clearmatics and Axioni and so on. I think what you're seeing now is multiple years of real heavy systems trying to build real things, trying to build exchanges, trying to build healthcare systems, supply chains. And we've got a lot clearer idea of the requirements there. And another thing to say really about public versus enterprise, permissioned, permissionless, and so on. Again, lots of demonization, lots of black and white thinking along those lines, where the reality is that a lot of these are just deployment decisions, and the tech is literally the same. It's just like, well, am I deploying it out in public or behind a firewall? Have I got this method or that method? A lot of these are really, they're just configuration choices. And that was something that we said again at the launch of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, was that there was this common thought that when you looked at what was happening with permissioned and enterprise chains right now, that they're very analogous to sort of intranets. It's kind of like a training wheels sort of setup of saying, well, look, here's, my first blockchain project. They're obviously doing something like that internally in a controlled kind of way is an obvious, safe, rational choice for a lot of people. And especially where we are on scalability, doing large-scale things on public networks, it just doesn't work now anyway. They're just too slow and too expensive. And that doesn't mean it will never work. Of course it doesn't mean it will never work. But it's just not a rational thing to do right now. But what we do have going on is an awful lot of different attack vectors on that scaling issue. Some of which Aidan talked about. So, you have side chains. So again, side chains is, it's a bit of an old term. I don't know, we could do with some better terms really. But, you have all these, various state channels approaches. And then on the Ethereum side, you have things like the POA network and Loom, where you've got, an Ethereum flavored thing, but with alternate consensus. And I think that's great. Those really are very, very analogous to what's been happening within the enterprise space. It's just like, well, yeah, we like Ethereum, but can we do this form of consensus instead? you know, and again, it's an engineering trade-off, because you're getting, you know, 100 or 1,000 times more throughput. And yeah, you couldn't do that on a public network because you've compromised the decentralization. But within that particular scenario, it's fine. Because you're not going to have a single deployment of any of these things. You know, what we're going to have at the end is we are going to have web-scale deployments. You know, we're going to have thousands of different chains for different reasons, and we're going to have public chains that are permissionless. We're going to have public permission chains. We're going to have private. We're going to have consortium. We're going to have off-chain scaling. You know, a lot of these things, it doesn't make sense to do the computation on-chain if you can do it off to the side and have suitable crypto-economic game theory that you can prove the correctness of that. And then so interchain stuff is becoming incredibly important. You know, so you see Cosmos and Polkadot and Ion and also Interledger and various others that connecting these chains is becoming hugely important. And I mean, the other thing to say, of course, is that blockchain, you know, isn't the right solution for everything. Like, far from it. You know, running some computation on the Ethereum mainnet versus on a single AWS node is perhaps, you know, I've seen it's perhaps as much as 100 million times more expensive. You know, it's hugely, hugely expensive to get global consensus on a fact. You know, so if you have a sort of a naive thought of saying, well, you know, we're going to run all our systems on blockchains, you know, world computer, that sounds really powerful, so I can run my things on it. Well, no, you know, you're not going to have every mouse click of every person in the whole world. You know, can we just verify that? It's a ridiculous thought. What we are going to have is just a whole variety of these systems, you know, private and public, tied together in some way that meets, you know, the needs of whatever it is that they're trying to do. You're going to need lots and lots of different flavors for lots and lots of different things. You've got lots of innovation happening around the virtual machine as well, because really the innovation or change that you had with Ethereum over Bitcoin was just a separation of the application from the platform. Really the recognition that if you looked at what was going on there, you really have a sort of a standard computing problem. If you want to run lots of different types of things, well, you need a platform like the web, like Android, like Windows. You know, it's really no different. It's just a target platform to write things to, apart from the thing is running in a distributed manner. So what you have there is a virtual machine which is much like any others. But really the Ethereum virtual machine, well, it was designed 4 years ago, and it was sort of the first one. And like anything else, the first one of anything is usually a bit crap. And you know, the years go by and you learn what works and what hasn't worked. So there's a lot of effort at the moment around EWASM, which is, so WebAssembly is a new binary format for the web, which really is meeting a lot of the same kind of goals, but it wasn't around 4 years ago. Well, it is now, so great. You know, can we leverage that? Can we leverage the work of Google and Mozilla and Microsoft? That's one thing. IELE is an effort happening mainly within Cardano, which is really trying to do a sort of a formal verification thing of really, I guess it's a different kind of mindset, right? It's really sort of, you know, aerospace grade. You know, can we build something which you can prove is correct and unhackable? And it's a sensible thing to look at. You know, if you're building the backbone of the financial system, or you're building these critical systems, well, yeah, you know, it makes sense to put an awful lot of effort into it. There's work within Corda. So Corda is built on top of the Java virtual machine again, but the Java virtual machine is not deterministic. So again, you know, work to the same kind of aim. then Sputnik VM is within Ethereum Classic. But lots of different parallel efforts. Greg Colvin doing work on more incremental stuff there. The landscape on the organizational side is maturing as well. Again, going back to the start of Ethereum, the Ethereum Foundation is all there was. There was a crowd sale, and it's like, great, we've got some money. The money goes to go and build the platform. So, there were 3 development teams funded there, a C++ one, a Go one, and a Python one, and then there was also other independent teams doing JavaScript and Java. And really, the Ethereum Foundation was sort of doing and running everything. And that really isn't the case anymore because, the things kind of succeeded. So you've got an ecosystem. You've got lots and lots of independent companies. Not only building dApps on top of it, but working on the protocol pieces. You've got loads of independent teams looking to build clients, looking to build tooling around that. You had the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance that I've mentioned that released an initial specification for what an enterprise-grade Ethereum client looked like. And again, that's an ongoing effort. First kind of line in the sand towards the kind of maturity that you see in lots of other industries of really saying you don't want to have vendor lock-in where you're dependent on any single company building the thing. If you look at how browsers work, well, yeah, you've got multiple browsers, and all of those are working around a set of specifications, and the fact that you have multiple companies building things, and not just companies, obviously any individuals can build any of these things themselves, but that really keeps things honest and really stops you getting any sort of center of control. So you have this weird kind of irony of the fact that having these centralized bodies and organizations is actually what helps the thing decentralize better. But if you don't have the centralized standard or group of people working, it's harder to avoid that kind of capture. You have Hyperledger, which is a Linux Foundation project, which is an umbrella for open source blockchain projects. And there's a lot of confusion around Hyperledger as well. People often conflate Hyperledger with IBM blockchain with Fabric. And all of those are independent. Hyperledger is an umbrella for open source blockchain projects. It's independent of any given company. There's about 200 different member companies. And within that umbrella, there are multiple different blockchain projects. So Fabric is the best known one, and people will often say, are you using Hyperledger? And what they really mean is, are you using Hyperledger Fabric? Or more often, they actually mean, are you using IBM blockchain, which is a particular bundling of that. But Oracle blockchain is using Fabric as well. Or you can run Fabric within Microsoft Azure. You've got lots of sort of second level associations appearing now. So DIF is the Decentralized Identity Foundation. And that's a group which is helping to define standards for decentralized identity, so really self-sovereign identity. The idea that you should be able to have ownership and control of your own identity pieces. But really, for those things to be interoperable, you need to have some primitives for describing these things and some commonality. If you have to have a UPort thing and a civic thing and multiple of these different things, well, how is that any better than what we have right now? Trusted IoT Alliance is working on Internet of Things appliances and so on, which are using cryptography and blockchain. So again, you have a need for interoperability between different companies, between different blockchain tech bases. And the Accord project is a legal tech project. So what you're seeing with these things is really industry-led projects which really don't want the very first question to be, well, what's your tech base? You know, are you using Fabric? Are you using Ethereum? And depending on that answer, that you're off to talk to completely different groups of people. Because that really is the siloing that we have had over the last couple of years, is that you've had these multiple groups building tech in a given area on top of a given code base and just not working together. And I think that really has been indicative of the early stage that we're in, where all of the richness of the ecosystem that you expect for mobile or web development, you know, just hasn't been there. It's like all of the middleware's been missing, you know, all of the frameworks, all of the libraries, all of the education, you know, that anyone coming into the space, you know, it's a mess. Just trying to work out what's going on and what the things are and how the things go together. You know, there hasn't been good onboarding or a good map. And it's really because the answer is, well, yeah, it's a mess. That's the truth. That's why it looks such a mess. And then, you know, down the bottom, standards bodies. So, you know, IETF for the internet, W3C for the web, you know, ISO standards, ICANN is, you know, domain names. And there are many, many more. You know, we're just sort of at the point where discussions with these groups are really starting, right? You know, that we're sort of feeling each other out and starting to go to each other's meetings, you know, that you will need, you know, blockchain standards. You're going to need these interoperability things. It's too early to do that now, but you really need to, you know, be getting to know each other and working on these things. And these are starting to happen. And I think that really especially starts to happen, you know, when these sort, you know, Accord project, Trusted IoT and so on, when those start to happen, so that you're not, you know, tying anything into any given, you know, particular standard. You know, it's really hard to engage with a standards body if you're just a commercial company or you're a particular tech base. Because it's like, well, why would they talk to you? Because you're just trying to push your product, so that's not a standard yet. You know, standards are really when particular pieces become commodity, where, you know, you really don't have so much of a commercial incentive. You know, they are just enabling common factors underneath. John Walpert is a great guy. He previously worked at IBM. He was sort of, you know, number 2 at IBM Blockchain, was the product lead for Fabric. And he now works for Consensus. So he says, by 2020, the concept of public versus private blockchain networks will be relegated to a historic footnote. We'll not pit public networks against private networks. Instead, there will be public transactions and private transactions, confidential contracts and open contracts, and they will coordinate their scope across bilateral, multilateral, and public environments depending on the needs of users. Just as messages today pass between public and private environments using common internet protocols. In this world, we can transact peer-to-peer, conduct completely confidential agreements, and seamlessly coordinate public and private data, business rules, and users within minutes without having to set up different blockchain infrastructure for each group or use case. So he says, connect the patterns, forget the flags. I wish we could take all the good work out there, the patterns each team in the blockchain space has explored for the last several years, and lop off all the brands, the flags, the preciousness we all get when looking at our own babies. We'd see it as a bag full of Legos, a set of potential standards converging on what we really need in order to build awesome new applications that transcend the limitations and troubling central control issues of client-server. And his tag for this is stateful internet, is really seeing what's happening here as a continuation, really, of that internet story. That we got to a place with the internet and the web where, you know, you could publish this information around the world, that that we've really got, you know, the knowledge of humanity at everyone's fingertips. But the problem is that, you know, all of the actual details of that live within particular silos controlled by particular companies. And you know, and you can get very paranoid about that. And some of that is rightful, and some of it is not so much. But even on a simpler level, what that really means is that the timelines of any data or information being around ends up getting tied to particular companies. You know, if someone's business goes under, well, whoop, those servers are gone, and whatever was on there, it's lost. And it doesn't matter if someone can say, well, hey, I'll keep that thing going. You know, that's useful to me. I'll carry it on. Often the reality is that that's either not technically possible or not legally possible. Really, because we've got this dependency into servers, and those servers are run by particular people, and we haven't had the right incentive models to allow people to keep things going that they care about. You know, that you really have this tie-in with, if you publish a thing, you're kind of yourself accountable for keeping the thing running. You know, and there's really no way for anyone to help you. So really what that's talking about with the stateful internet is that, you know, this state, this data is just floating out there wherever it's floating, rather than being captured as part of the protocol itself. And I think that's really what a lot of the blockchain technologies are really looking to do, is say, well, can we store the state? Can we store the data in some way which is persistent and is not dependent on any given company or any given infrastructure, that if people care about the stuff and are willing to pay directly or indirectly for the thing, that it can just keep going. And I think that's a really great way of looking at it. Any questions? So the question is, what do I think about the Moloch DAO from Amin at SpankChain? So I was at Consensus when Amin did his pitch for Moloch Ventures. So how many people know what Moloch is? So Moloch was the Babylonian god of child sacrifice. There was a paper written called Reflections on Moloch about a year or so ago that inspired Amin to start his ventures, and what Reflections on Moloch was talking about was drawing really this analogy with Moloch and the idea of the Leviathan, and you know that really capitalism and industrialism is, you know, it's this beast, and we're all being ground into the machine. You know, we're feeding the beast, and really, I guess when you're going through any paradigm change, there's two things that you can do. You can either try and sort of do a soft landing and try and absorb the thing, or you can just blow it out of the water. So the idea really so what Amin pitched within Consensus, there wasn't a Consensus San Francisco studio at the time. So what he pitched was that should be called Moloch Ventures, and it should be a dark sibling of Consensus. So where Consensus was trying to, you know, work with the banks and you know, basically like soft land things, that Moloch Ventures would be burning the thing to the ground, right? You know, the fastest way to get through to the other end is just to go completely rogue, you know, just burn it to the ground, destroy it. Anyway, so that pitch didn't go too well. And so he ended up starting his own company, and then the first thing they've done is this project called SpankChain. So SpankChain is basically it's payment for cam girls. So it's, you know, it's basically a porn site. So, you know, again, it's like, well, you know, socially unacceptable. But on the other side, what you actually have there is You know, it's really that, you know, lots of sex workers are unbanked. You know, they're the untouchables who get closed out of the financial system because you have that centralized control. You know, so it's like, okay, so it's cam girls, but it's sort of a social good as well. And then the other thing that you have out of that is Amin is a real state channels guy. So they've got one of the best state channels implementations. Why? Because you're doing payments and you need fast payments. So one thing they're doing is Multichain now, which is funding for blockchain projects. Okay, I think I'm out of time. Unless anyone's got one quick question. Anyone else? No questions. Cheers, everyone.